You won't believe the kind of petty drama I got dragged into with my neighbor. It all started with something as simple as a trash can, but it turned into a full-on neighborhood battle. If you've ever had that one person who seems to make it their mission to ruin your day, then you'll understand exactly what I went through. Every week on trash day, I noticed the same annoying problem. I'd roll my can out to the curb like everyone else on my street, but when the garbage truck came, my can was never standing where I left it. Instead, it was tipped over on its side. The lid cracked open and trash bags spilled out into the street. Sometimes the bags ripped, and I'd have to chase after loose garbage blowing into my neighbor's yard. It was embarrassing and frustrating, and it made me look like I didn't care about keeping my place clean, when in reality, I've always taken pride in my home. At first, I tried to come up with logical explanations. Maybe the wind was stronger than usual. Maybe some stray dog had gotten into it. I even considered raccoons or other animals that like to rummage through trash. But after paying more attention, I realized something didn't add up. The wind wasn't that strong, and if it were animals, wouldn't other cans on the block be knocked over too? Yet every single time it was just mine. Neighbors' trash cans stood tall and untouched, while mine lay flat like it had been pushed deliberately. That's when a thought crossed my mind. What if this wasn't random at all? What if someone was doing it on purpose? The idea made me uneasy, because honestly, who would waste their time knocking over someone's trash can? But the more it happened, the more I realized there had to be an intentional hand behind it. Started looking around, and it didn't take me long to guess who the culprit might be. My neighbor across the street, let's just call her Karen. She had the reputation of being the unofficial HOA police. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. She was the type to measure your grass with a ruler, take pictures if your Christmas lights were up a day too long, and complain at HOA meetings about declining standards if your car had a speck of dust on it. She lived for controlling everyone else, and unfortunately, I seemed to be her new target. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. She had already made a few snarky comments in the past about my trash can being too visible from the street. According to the HOA guidelines, cans were supposed to be tucked away neatly when not in use. But come on, it was trash day. Everyone had theirs out. Mine wasn't breaking any rules, yet somehow she had singled me out. Week after week, the same thing kept happening. I'd drag my trash can out, and the next morning there it was. Knocked over, garbage scattered, and me left to clean up the mess. I started to dread trash day, not because of the garbage, but because of the humiliation. My neighbors probably thought I was careless, when in reality I knew deep down it wasn't an accident. One morning I woke up earlier than usual and peeked outside, just to check if maybe I could catch the moment it happened. And sure enough, my can was standing upright when I looked. An hour later, when I went back to check again, it was tipped over. No strong winds, no raccoons, nothing else in sight. That's when my suspicion about Karen grew stronger than ever. She always walked her little yappy dog early in the mornings, right around the time my can magically ended up on its side. It was infuriating. I felt like I was being picked on in my own neighborhood, like a kid being bullied on the playground, except instead of stealing my lunch money, she was making me chase down trash bags and clean up the mess she created. I didn't understand why she had such a problem with me, but what I did understand was that it wasn't going to stop unless I did something about it. Still, I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. I wanted to be sure, but in my gut I already knew Karen was behind it. And the more I thought about her smug little smirk whenever she walked past my driveway, the more determined I became to turn the tables on her. The morning I finally saw her in action was the moment everything clicked into place. I had always suspected Karen, but there's a big difference between suspicion and proof. That Saturday, I made myself a strong cup of coffee, sat down by the front window and pretended to enjoy the sunrise while really keeping my eyes locked on the curb where my trash can stood. The neighborhood was quiet, birds chirping, the kind of calm morning you'd normally love. But I was sitting there with my heart beating fast, waiting for the truth to reveal itself. It didn't take long. Like clockwork, there she was, Karen walking her tiny barking dog that looked like it hated the world just as much as its owner did. She strolled down the sidewalk, chin up, sunglasses on, that classic "I own this neighborhood" walk. When she reached my driveway, she paused. She glanced over her shoulder, then to the other side of the street, just to see if anyone was around. But she didn't know I was watching from my window, and then she did it. She lifted her foot and gave my trash can a sharp kick. The bin toppled over onto its side, the lid snapped open, and a bag rolled halfway into the street. She didn't even flinch. She didn't even look guilty. In fact, she smirked. With the leash in one hand, she tugged her little dog forward like nothing happened and kept on walking, leaving me with garbage out in plain sight for the whole neighborhood to see. I stood there in disbelief. I had caught her red-handed. For weeks I thought maybe I was overthinking, maybe I was paranoid, but no. There she was, actually sabotaging my trash can like some cartoon villain. And for what? Because she didn't like the way it looked sitting at the curb, just like everyone else's on trash day. I was fuming. Part of me wanted to run outside right then and there, catch up to her, and demand to know why she thought it was okay to keep pulling this nonsense. But instead I decided to wait until later. I needed to cool down a bit before I lost my temper. Later that day I walked over to her yard, trying to keep things civil. I called out, "Hey Karen, can we talk for a second?" She was trimming her rose bushes like she was the queen of some castle. She turned, narrowed her eyes, and said, "What is it?" I told her straight. "I noticed my trash can keeps getting knocked over every single week. I saw it happen today. Do you know anything about that?" Her face didn't even twitch. She crossed her arms, gave me that smug look, and replied, "Well, maybe if you followed the HOA rules and stored it properly, this wouldn't be happening. Your can is an eyesore, and honestly, it lowers the curb appeal of the whole street. You should be thanking me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Thanking her? She had the nerve to admit she didn't like my trash can being out, and then somehow twisted into doing me a favor? I bit my tongue, trying to stay calm. "Karen, knocking it over isn't following the rules. That's vandalism. You're creating a bigger mess than the can itself ever did." She rolled her eyes and muttered, "Some people just don't belong in this neighborhood." Then she turned her back on me like the conversation was over. That line stung more than I expected. I've worked hard for my home. I pay my dues like everyone else. And here she was, acting like I didn't deserve to live there because my trash can offended her sense of perfection. It wasn't just about the can anymore. It was about control. She wanted to make me miserable, to remind me that she thought she was in charge of the entire street. I walked back to my house feeling frustrated and honestly humiliated. She didn't even try to deny it. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she thought she was untouchable because the HOA always seemed to back her up at meetings. It felt like I was outnumbered, like no matter what I did, she'd always have the upper hand. But here's the thing about people like Karen. The more they push, the more determined you get to push back. Her arrogance lit a fire under me. I wasn't going to let her keep walking all over me like this. If she thought she was clever, she had no idea who she was messing with. That's when the idea started forming in my mind. If I wanted this to stop, I couldn't just confront her with words. I needed proof. I needed a plan. And most importantly, I needed to make sure the next time she messed with my trash can, she'd regret it. After that disastrous confrontation, I realized something crystal clear. Arguing with Karen was useless. She wasn't the type of person you could reason with. She thrived on drama, loved having control, and believed she was always right. So, instead of wasting more energy trying to convince her to stop, I decided I needed solid proof of what she was doing. Proof so undeniable that even the HOA, who usually bent over backward for her, wouldn't be able to ignore it. I started brainstorming. Cameras seemed like the obvious solution. If I could record her in the act, there would be no more excuses, no more, "You're imagining things," or "It was the wind." It would be right there in black and white, or in this case, high definition, color. That night I went online and ordered a motion-activated security camera. something small, discreet, and powerful enough to catch every detail. But as I clicked checkout, another thought struck me. Why stop at just catching her? Why not make her experience what she'd been putting me through? For weeks she had been getting her little thrill out of knocking my trash over, probably chuckling to herself every time she saw me cleaning up the mess. If I was going to deal with someone like Karen, I wanted her to feel the same frustration she had caused me, except worse. That's when I stumbled across something brilliant, a special kind of trash can. At first glance, it looked completely normal, just your average big black wheeled bin. But it had one very sneaky feature. The lid wasn't just a regular flap. It had a built-in locking mechanism that latched automatically and could only be opened by pressing a hidden release button on the handle. On top of that, the lid was spring-loaded, meaning if someone tried to force it open, it would snap shut with a satisfying thwack. It wasn't dangerous, but it was definitely surprising, and I instantly knew it was perfect. I ordered one right then and there. Waiting for it to arrive felt like waiting for Christmas morning. Every day, I imagined Karen trying her usual stunt, only to have it blow up in her face. The thought alone made me smile every time I dragged my current bin out to the curb. For once, trash day didn't feel like a burden. It felt like setting a trap. When the box finally came, I wasted no time. I set up the new bin in my garage, tested the lock, and made sure the spring-loaded lid worked exactly as described. Then, I installed the camera on my porch, angling it perfectly so the can and the sidewalk were both in frame. It was like setting up a stage for the final act of a play, and I couldn't wait for the star, Karen, to make her big debut. The night before pickup, I carefully rolled the new bin out to the curb. To anyone passing by, it looked ordinary. But I knew it was anything but. My heart was racing as I went back inside, locked the door, and checked the live feed from the camera on my phone. The trash can sat there, innocent and upright, just waiting for trouble. All I had to do now was wait. And trust me, waiting felt like forever. I went to bed, but I couldn't really sleep. Part of me was nervous. What if she didn't take the bait? What if she skipped her morning walk? But another part of me was giddy, almost excited, knowing that if she did try her usual stunt, I'd finally get the satisfaction I'd been craving for weeks. Morning came, and I poured myself another cup of coffee. Instead of sitting by the window this time, I pulled out my phone and opened the camera feed. The street was quiet, a few neighbors rolling out their own cans, the sun just starting to peek over the rooftops. And then, like clockwork, I saw her. Karen, with her tiny dog pulling at the leash, heading straight down the sidewalk with that same smug strut. My pulse quickened. She had no idea what was waiting for her. Through the camera feed, I watched her approach like I'd been waiting for this moment my entire life. The street was quiet, the only sound coming from her dog's little nails tapping on the sidewalk as it pulled her toward my driveway. Karen stopped right in front of my house, adjusted her sunglasses, and looked around with that familiar, cautious glance, as if the world revolved around her and she was the star of some secret mission. She thought no one was watching. Little did she know, I had a front row seat. She gave the leash a tug to keep her dog from sniffing the grass too long, then shifted her attention to my brand new bin. She didn't hesitate. With the same arrogance I'd seen before, she lifted her foot and gave it a swift kick. Except this time nothing happened. The can didn't fall. It didn't even budge. It stood there as solid as a brick wall, and I could see the confusion on her face even through the grainy camera feed. Karen frowned, kicked it again, harder this time. Still nothing. The can remained upright, locked in place, perfectly balanced. She muttered something under her breath, probably annoyed that her usual trick wasn't working. Her dog barked as if echoing her frustration. But Karen wasn't the type to back down easily, not when she thought she was in control. That's when she bent over and grabbed the lid. She yanked at it, trying to force it open, but the locking mechanism held tight. The harder she pulled, the tighter it seemed to resist. She planted her feet, pulled again with both hands, and then, snap, the spring-loaded lid whipped back into place and smacked down on her fingers with a loud thwack. Even from inside my house, I could hear her yelp. She stumbled backward, flailing her arms, and nearly tripped over her own dog's leash. The little dog barked like crazy as she shook her hand in the air, grimacing in pain and outrage. She had that look of someone who just got caught in a moment they didn't see coming, a mix of anger, shock, and complete humiliation. I couldn't stop laughing. Sitting there on my couch, phone in hand, I replayed the clip over and over, each time catching new details. The way she glanced around nervously afterward. The way she tried to act like nothing happened, even though she was clearly flustered. At one point, she even gave the bin one last glare, as if she thought her intimidation tactics would work on an inanimate object. The best part was how quickly she retreated. Usually she'd stroll down the street with her dog like she owned the place. But after the trash can fought back, she practically yanked the leash, dragging her poor dog away in a hurry. She didn't even finish her usual loop around the block. She just turned the corner and disappeared out of sight, her shoulders tense, her pace quick, probably hoping no one had seen her embarrassing defeat. But of course, someone had seen it. I had every second saved in crystal clear HD. It was beautiful. For weeks, she had made my mornings miserable, knocking over my bin, spilling trash, making me look like the neighborhood slob. And in one glorious instant, she got a taste of her own medicine. I spent the rest of that morning with a grin plastered on my face. It wasn't just the satisfaction of knowing she'd been caught. It was the sweet justice of watching karma play out right in front of my eyes. She had no idea that not only had the trash can put her in her place, but now I had undeniable video proof of everything she'd been doing. I sent the clip to a few close neighbors who I trusted, just to get their reaction. Their responses were priceless. One neighbor wrote back, "I knew she was behind it." Another laughed and said, "That's the best thing I've ever seen. Please show that at the HOA meeting." It turned out I wasn't the only one tired of her antics. She'd been bothering everyone in little ways, but I was the first to actually catch her. That night, I watched the video again before bed, and I'll admit, it felt like a little victory trophy sitting in my phone gallery. Karen thought she could keep bullying me without consequences, but now I had the upper hand. And the best part was knowing this wasn't just about me anymore. With proof like this, she couldn't hide behind excuses, and she couldn't bully her way out of accountability. The stage was set. Trash day had given me more than just an empty bin. It had handed me the perfect weapon to finally put Karen in her place. When the next HOA meeting rolled around, I knew it was my moment. Karen was always front and center at these gatherings, treating them like her personal stage. She'd sit in the middle of the front row, clipboard in hand, ready to complain about someone's lawn being half an inch too tall, or Christmas lights being left up one day past the deadline. Everyone else dreaded these meetings, but this time, I couldn't wait. I walked into the community hall with my phone tucked safely in my pocket. The meeting started like usual. Boring announcements, budget talks, all the stuff nobody really cared about. Then, right on schedule, Karen raised her hand. "I have a complaint," she began, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Some residents aren't following trash can regulations. It's lowering property values and making our neighborhood look unsightly." I could almost laugh. Here she was, still doubling down, still pretending she was the savior of the street. She was about to launch into her usual tirade, but the HOA president stopped her. "We'll get to that," he said. "But first, does anyone else have concerns?" That was my cue. I raised my hand and stood up, trying to keep my expression calm, though inside I was buzzing with anticipation. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to bring up an issue I've been having. It's about harassment. Specifically, someone repeatedly knocking over my trash can." The room stirred a little. A few neighbors glanced at Karen, almost instinctively. She folded her arms and rolled, her eyes clearly ready to deny everything. "I think you're exaggerating," she muttered under her breath. I smiled and pulled out my phone. "Luckily," I continued, "I decided to set up a camera to see what was happening, and I caught it on video." The HOA president looked curious. "Would you like to share it with the group?" "Absolutely." I connected my phone to the projector and the screen lit up with the footage. Silence fell across the room as the video played. There was Karen, clear as day, kicking my trash can once, then twice, then fumbling with the lid. And then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the spring-loaded snap. The lid smacked her hand and she jumped back like a startled cat, yelping in surprise before dragging her dog away in defeat. The room erupted. Some people tried to cover their laughter, but others didn't even bother. The HOA president coughed into his hand, trying not to smile, while a couple of neighbors outright clapped. One man in the back chuckled. Finally, she got what she deserved. Karen's face turned crimson. She stood up, sputtering. "This is taken out of context. I was just trying to help. His trash can?" But nobody was buying it. The proof was too clear. The HOA president raised his hand to quiet the room and looked straight at her. "Karen, this behavior is unacceptable. HOA rules don't give anyone the right to harass other residents or damage their property. You'll receive a formal warning, and if anything like this happens again, you'll face fines." For the first time since I'd known her, Karen didn't, too, have a comeback. She sat down in her chair, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes glued to the floor. The mighty queen of the HOA had just been dethroned in front of everyone, and I couldn't have scripted it better myself. The rest of the meeting went by quickly. People kept sneaking glances at me, some even whispering, "Nice job," or "That was amazing." I felt like a hero who had stood up to the villain, not with fists or shouting, but with patience, planning, and a little creativity. When I walked back home that evening, the air felt lighter. For weeks, I had dreaded trash day, hated the thought of waking up to another mess. But now I knew it was over. My trash can stood tall, untouched, like a trophy of my small but satisfying victory. And Karen? Well, let's just say things changed. She stopped walking her dog past my house. She stopped glaring at me from across the street. At meetings, she sat quietly, no longer the loudest voice in the room. It was like her power had been stripped away the moment the truth came out. Neighbors who used to tolerate her now knew exactly what she was capable of, and they weren't afraid to laugh about it behind her back. The best part was the peace. My mornings went back to normal. No more chasing garbage bags, no more embarrassment, no more unnecessary stress. It was amazing how something as small as a trash can could cause so much chaos, and how sweet it felt to finally put an end to it. Sometimes life hands you unfair situations, and you can either let them drag you down or find a way to rise above them. For me, all it took was a little patience, a clever idea, and one very special trash can that Karen definitely didn't see coming.